continue to explore crime categories. The 2022-23 Victims of Crimes survey findings have been released. Housebreaking went up, as did home robberies and car theft compared to 2021, although only around half the incidences are reported to the police. For more serious crimes, such as murder, reporting figures were higher. I'm joined now by Statistician-General Risenga Maluleke for this discussion. A very good afternoon to you, Statistician-General. Thank you for your time. Perhaps let's start right at the beginning on the composition of your bid to explore public perception of safety. What were some of the focal areas?
Well, we look at one cases that are not necessarily always reported to the police. So we are not in competition with what the South African police services make available as their statistics, but this data complement each other because in their case, they talk about cases reported to police stations. In our case, we go to households and we talk to them. So that is number one. Number two is that we look at household level issues like theft of motor vehicle, murder, sexual offense. And when we say theft of a motor vehicle, we are talking of when a vehicle is parked at the household level. Whereas at in an individual level, we look at issues like murder, sexual offenses, as well as hijacking, because at an individual level, then the vehicle could be taken when you are driving or you are stopping at a traffic light.
So according to the report, I mean, household experience of housebreaking has increased and theft of property. These were crimes that mostly affected those who participated in the survey. What stood out for you?
Well, let us look at, for example, housebreaking. And housebreaking is different from home robbery because housebreaking is when something occurs at home when you are not there. So it went up. We had cases of about 2.3 million of housebreaking, and that was up by about 6% in the last 5 years. Whereas in the case of murder, for example, we are saying that we were up. There were experiences of about 54,000 cases at household level. And that was up by about 43%. That is in the last 5 years. But when we look in the last 12 months, in terms of the last 5 years, we have seen an increase by about 43%. So let me mention that the other issue that we look is perceptions of safety of people in their neighborhood.
So what I found interesting as you speak about the perceptions of people in their neighborhood was the findings on Limpopo, how residents are saying that they felt safest walking alone during the day and at night, and also had the most trust in their neighbors, which is quite different to other provinces like Gauteng.
Well, the urban provinces tended, Gauteng, the Western Cape, tended to have lesser levels of trust on their neighbors, whereas the rural provinces, as you have already indicated, KwaZulu-Natal, in KwaZulu-Natal, they could even trust their neighbor to look after, to watch over their house when they are away. But it's like this. In rural areas, people tend to know almost everyone in their village. They tend to even know people that are in neighboring villages, whereas in suburbs, people in gated communities, in estates, they don't even know the person in the next estate. So that explains it. But I want us to come back again to what we have picked up with urban provinces like Gauteng and the Western Cape, particularly the Western Cape. The people in the Western Cape had knowledge about forums that discuss issues of public safety or any other community-related issues like service delivery more than any other province. So what you find in rural provinces like Limpopo, KwaZulu-Natal, and the Eastern Cape is you don't necessarily find in urban provinces and vice versa.
You also, you spoke a little bit about murder and, of course, just in rounding up our conversation, the figures that you're speaking about now also relating to the latest quarterly crime statistics released by police around murder, being on the increase, and also those stats showed a few significant changes when it comes to improved safety. What role do you think that these figures, what does these figures tell us about the role of the SAPS in the fight against crime, especially just linking the figures we saw yesterday, the quarterly crime stats?
Well, the first thing is that these statistics, both from StatSA as the victims of crime approach, as well as the police, do assist the police and community structures that deal with crime to work together to minimize occurrences of crime in any neighborhood, and particularly the ones that come from the South African police services, because they report up to a level of police station. The second issue is that they help in terms of long-term planning, particularly the ones that come from us, as I say, in terms of long-term planning and policy formulations in relation to how provinces as well as the entire nation will deal with matters of crime.
And where are we falling short as a country, as well as looking at the laws in place, as well as the role of police and communities?
By all means, yes, but also because there are also perceptions of how members of a society feel about their neighborhoods and how they feel about law enforcement officers, as we have reported, including previously.
Absolutely. And the perception of how members feel about law enforcement officials is also quite imperative, because then it would speak to the confidence in neighbors or communities reporting crimes. I mean, if there's house robberies happening, perhaps some community members may feel that perhaps calling the police won't do much justice, because they've sort of perceived a pattern about the police and reporting crime.
Well, two things about that. One is that members of communities tend to have more trust on the police than they do on the courts. And we should understand the police are the first port of call when a crime occurs, especially crimes that are reported. But when it goes, such a case goes to courts, it then enters court jargon and the processes of the courts that communities may not fully comprehend. That is the one part. The second issue, it has to do with certain crimes like murder, theft of motor vehicle. They tend to be reported a lot more with the police compared to housebreaking. And it's because murder, people take it serious. They want to see recourse and justice for it. Motor vehicle theft and hijacking, there's also an issue of insurances linked to that. Whereas if it's a housebreaking or home robbery, sometimes they may not need to claim from insurances.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Statistician-General Risenga Maluleke there, just talking us through some of the perceptions around crime. Thank you for your time. Still to